Royal family's going to come. We'll be all thankful for Thanksgiving Eve. To that end, if you could, honestly, I will show you how simple this is. What I need you to do, you and your family, pull out your phone, swipe to pull out your camera, do the little swirly button so that you're actually seeing yourself, and record something for 15 seconds, just like, we are thankful for, and then you can email it to me. You'll be getting some information soon where I'll give you the link to the actual folder where you can drop it. But honestly, I've only received a couple of videos, but they're precious. There's one where it's like, this is so sweet because some people know the story behind this thankfulness, and there's others where it's just like, that is so real to life that I think any parent would be like, I want to be thankful for that too. That's on my Christmas list, that type of thing. So please, just shoot me a video. Super simple. You don't have to edit it. As long as it's in landscape, I can see you and I can hear you. It's good. Now, what else is coming? So after Thanksgiving, some of you are already jumping the gun. You're already into Christmas. Advent happens before that. The 28th of November through Christmas Eve is the season of Advent. Oftentimes we've done series here at Christ Victorious, and we're cruising through, we'll say we're cruising through the New Testament, we're going through the prophets, we went through Revelation, and we didn't do Advent, so to speak, which is okay, because we were in the middle of some other really deep, cool stuff. But for us, we're going to look at Advent, specifically waiting for. Advent means that season of waiting, means return. I'll unpack that all later. But the season's going to start. It's called Waiting For, and we're going to look at the 4 themes of Advent, which are hope, peace, joy, and love. And how is it that we wait that way? What does it mean regarding Jesus' first return, second return? How does that impact us now? Does this relate with Christmas? Should it not? All that. With that, there will not be any small groups in December, but yes, there will be confirmation. So, one of you over there, what's still happening in December? Good for you. So the 1st, the 8th, and the 15th. Your mentors know that. There's still going to be a large group teaching, but it's going to be over there. You're going to start unpacking something called the Apostles' Creed. You know what it is. In fact, it's your memory work. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So that's what they'll be doing. For us, during Advent, there's also going to be a digital devotion using the Bible app or YouVersion. If you have not downloaded the Bible app, you are not one of the 500 million people in the world who already have downloaded the Bible app. I kid you, they have over 500 million people that have downloaded this and are using it all around the world. We're going to use that platform to kind of have an interactive devotion using one that the Bible Project has put together, believe it or not, using these same 4 themes for Advent. So what we're going to do for the sermon series is going to dovetail with this devotion. The devotion is every day for 4 weeks. Super simple. Some of you, I kind of beta tested this last year, and some of you joined with me. It's going to be that same one, but come back a year later, those 4 themes are going to be different because your life has changed. So God has something to teach you. We also will have 2 different Advent calendars for you. One, if you remember, if some of you are on Facebook and you saw me horrifically lose to my wife in gift wrapping, we have one of those fun interactive calendars again this year. So this is put out by Orange. So that one we will have available for you once Advent starts. And we have another calendar that goes along with Hearts for Mission. Hearts for Mission, that's our emphasis, so that every month we have a particular service or mission for us as God's people here at Christ Victorious to engage in. This is like a reverse Advent calendar. Now, typically, if you go to Aldi, they're still in stock, at least right now, where you open the little door, you pull out a piece of chocolate, yeah, you opened your Advent calendar for the day. This one, you open something, you actually put something in it. Except the calendar is a brown paper bag, and you're putting food items in there. And then come Christmas Eve or Christmas Day or the Sunday after Christmas when you worship with us, bring that bag here. So typically, like with Thanksgiving, we do the food drive, and then there's like an angel tree thing in December. We just decided to switch it up this year, so the angel tree's there for November, and we're going to do the food drive in December. Last thing, December 15th, we've got a ton of spots open for Feed My Starving Children. We just want to serve together as a family, as a church. So there's some spots there. You can check out the bulletin, the website. All that information's coming. I just figured I'd unload it to y'all right now. Cool? Got it? Great. Okay, we're going to keep moving on. All right. Because we got a lot to cover. This is the last Wednesdays. We've talked about different types of church. So what does it mean to be an apologetic church? What does it mean to be a root and fruit church? What does it mean to be a vocational church? That's typically not vacational church, though that might be fun. Not vacation, vocation. So what is the difference? So to kind of get your brains moving, what is this? Anybody? It's a G.I. Joe, okay. What are these? All right, what's this? That's what was on every boy's Christmas list in like the 80s. And what's this? It's still the, I don't have one, I wouldn't mind, but what's this? Buzz Lightyear. Now, what are all these things? A few of you, I've heard you kind of mumbling it. What are they? They're action figures. You are a toy. If you remember from Toy Story with Buzz Lightyear, you're an action figure. Now, an action figure, what are they? Action figures do exactly what you see them doing on the screen right now. Nothing. You just pose them, and that's it. They just stay. They don't move. They are static. But that's not the point of why they're made. They're actually made to move because the one who has them, so little boy, little girl, whatever it might be, they get to move that action figure to actually do stuff. The whole point of the action figure is to do something. So within the hands of the one that's, like, in a sense, bringing them to life, they fight a war, they're fighting Thanos, they're transforming, or they're going to infinity and beyond, whatever the case might be. That's the point of an action figure. So I want you to keep those images in the back of your mind as we engage this section of Ephesians. This is probably the most well-known portion of Ephesians outside of chapter 2 where it says you are saved by grace through faith. The reason why is because how in the world do I do this whole like mom-dad kick? What does it mean for me to be a child that has parents? How do I do this whole marriage thing? This is one of the most clear spots where you'll see how has God set up these different patterns of living. And it also has something to say about like the school and work environment too, but we'll get there. Now, to fully understand this, though, it's really easy to just kind of take this section and like yank it out, but you've heard me say this part of going through Ephesians, don't do that. You don't want to take something out of context. You want to know what the road is leading to that, and then you want to know what the road is leading from that, so you actually know how it's working as part of the big puzzle. So with this, if we kind of strip away a little bit, I want to kind of show you how this sits. This sits underneath chapter 5, verse 21. That's the verse that says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. That word submit, it's a buzzword, it's a hot topic, and it's greatly, greatly misunderstood because it's been abused in a lot of different ways, unfortunately. To submit means you bring yourself underneath someone else and you allow them, they're allowing you to do something. We'll unpack that even later. But there's another verse that this one even sits underneath, and that's 5 verse 1. And 5 verse 1 says that we're supposed to be imitators of God. So now, if you go from top to bottom, follow that flow of thought, be imitators of God because you are beloved children. You've been made such by your Father. Imitate Him. One of the ways in which you imitate Him is you submit to one another. And actually, Jesus is the greatest example of this. Think of Him praying in the garden, not my will, but your will be done. So Jesus submitting to the will of the Father, and then says, okay, well, let's give some practical examples about how this works within the household that God's established. So within this larger umbrella of how all these fit together, you can see how it works with husbands and wives, you can see how it works with parents and children, and you can also see how it works with masters and slaves. And that's actually what we're going to look at tonight, is the masters and slaves portion. So, going into Ephesians chapter 6. So it's on page 950 in your pew Bible if you didn't bring your Bible from home. Here's how it starts. Slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ. So let's look at just this first section. I don't use the word slave too often. I don't know about you. But if we want to begin to even understand this verse, we have to, okay, what in the world is being referred to when we look at slaves? Now, if you remember going way back to like the first week, I think this might have been the first or second Bible study that we did, it's important that you know kind of the historical context. I know that's a very dry term, but it's going to help you, it's going to keep you from misusing the Bible, which you don't want to misuse the Bible because it's going to just send you in a worse spot. So if God has given this to you to kind of shape your life, probably figure out how to use it. There's 3 different layers. The first is knowing the story. And what I mean by this story is like you know the overarching story of Scripture. The fact that from creation and the fall, God has been about the work of restoring his creation and redeeming, buying back that which sin stole, which is life as God designed it. So Ephesians is part of that story. You can't just take one part of Ephesians and gut it out from Ephesians. You can't just take Ephesians and rip it out of the Bible. You got to see that it's part of one huge story. So this discussion about slaves and masters has something to do with this overarching story of God. It's part of it. We're going to see how. The second part is the cultural story. So like what all is going on in Greco-Roman culture? It's called Greco-Roman because the Greeks took a whole swath of land, think of Alexander the Great, and then the Romans are just like, yeah, we're going to do all that too, and then some. So those are the 2 primary societal, governmental, cultural influences over this area of the Mediterranean world, which is called Greco-Roman. But the thing you have to understand is, what does slavery look like? Please keep this in mind. First century slavery in Asia Minor is not the same as 19th century slavery in America. And I think for us as 21st century Americans, we have to keep this in mind, because for a majority of us, unless you are like a complete history geek, when you hear the word slave, the first thing you think of is, oh, all those people that were like ripped out of tribes and then shipped across an ocean and then sold and bartered and abused and killed for work to be done. That's 19th century slavery in America. 1800s, that's not first century slavery in Asia Minor. So let me tell you what first century slavery in Asia Minor looked like. Yes, there was abuse of the system, but that was a minor point. That was a minority of the cases. Majority of the cases, people became slaves, and it was basically like indentured servitude. So probably the closest illustration I could come to, has anyone seen Downton Abbey? It's okay, I've seen it. I've seen half of it. After season 3, I just couldn't continue. Too heartbroken. So if you're not familiar with it, it's this aristocratic British family. They own a manor, Downton, and they have a ton of wait staff. Now, some of that wait staff, their parents were on the wait staff. And some of that wait staff, their children would then be part of the wait staff. Why? You think, why would you want to be a slave? You're a free person. Boo, the British. Come to America. We're all free and independent. Do whatever we want. Well, here's the thing. Those servants had housing, food, a modest income, and protection. Compare that to some crazy person who decides to leave the East and say, I'm going to go live in Minnesota in a sod hut. That's hard work. And you know what? You're probably going to die. Tons of pioneers did. So which is worse? That illustration of Downton Abbey and the waitstaff is probably what slavery for a majority of people in first century Asia Minor, so that's present-day Turkey, looked like. You were cared for. In fact, you were probably had it easier being the slave of a master than being a freedman. Because a freedman, you'd have to do a lot of stuff on your own. Whereas as a slave, you were provided shelter, food, guaranteed job, and it was actually easier and actually you may have gotten paid more than if you went on your own. That is the context of first century slavery. Some people intentionally put themselves into slavery to have a job, to make a living, to get paid. And their families ended up staying in there because they were treated well. Now again, there were abuses to the system. So I'm not saying there weren't. But when you see the word slave in the Bible, please do not automatically think, oh, that's the whole Civil War, 1800s. That's not the same thing. Any type of structure, no matter where you work, sin's going to wreak its havoc on it and turn the system inside and out. But for a majority of people, slavery, it's like it was just a manner and a way of living, and a way of life. Okay. Now, with all this historical context, you also need to know the situational story. So, what's going on in Ephesus? This sets the stage. All of this is the stage upon which all these rich truths about what it means to be children of God, that's where everything gets to play out. You can think about the historical context being the stage for your action figures. That's how it works. And in Ephesus, you have a church that's socially diverse, economically diverse, ethnically diverse, culturally diverse. So you have people that are slaves, but you also have people that are masters. So the church is not just for the elite, nor is it just for the common riffraff, as some people would call them. Everyone is involved. So how do they operate as family? Well, speaking of slaves, said, I want you to obey your master the same way you would obey Christ. Now here, get this, so you obey your master the same way you would obey Christ. There are two dynamics going on here. You have this earthly realm and this cosmic one. And we'll see this in Bible study when we talk about the armor of God. We've seen this actually several other places too in Ephesians. You have both this cosmic and earthly reality. A cosmic one and an earthly one. You can see this on your sheet. Those are the two fill in the blanks. I figured it'd be easier to write two words than a bunch of other ones. Cosmic, all are slaves to Christ. Actually, you only have two options. You're either a slave to Christ, you're a slave to sin. There is no third option. There is no ultimate independence. So you're actually a slave to Christ or a slave to sin. But on earth, all have been given places and positions through which they demonstrate their service to Christ. So you have an earthly reality where you live out this spiritual reality that you are serving Christ. Which is why Paul would tell the slaves, I want you to serve your master the same way as if you were serving Christ. He goes on and say, obey them not only to win their favor when their eye is on you, but as slaves of Christ, doing the will of God from your heart. Now, can anyone tell me that this phrase, right, we'll go here first. That obedience part, when you obey, remember how this fits in our understanding of our identity. We have a Father who's given us an identity. That identity then is expressed, it's seen, it's lived out, it's fleshed out in your obedience, what you do. The Father declares who you are and then directs you in what you do, and what you do reflects who you are. Keep in mind, with a lot of the discussion on the second half of Ephesians about do this, do this, do this, your doing does not earn you a relationship with the Father. You can't do it that way. It doesn't matter how good you are, you're never good enough to earn a position with the Father. That's not how it works. Trace it backwards. So if you trace it backwards, that means if you're not doing what you should, so that's mean you're disobedient, why? Trace it back to your identity. If you trace it back to your identity, then you're starting to realize, okay, well, who am I? And if you're struggling to like, I don't know, who am I? Listen to your dad. Listen to your father. So the obedience portion, when it's talking about slaves or masters and what they're supposed to do, this is an expression of who they are. Who they are, a redeemed person, someone who's being restored by the Spirit, that's part of the larger story of God redeeming and restoring everything that sin took away and robbed and perverted. So with that obedience, not only to win their favor, could anyone give me one word that would sum up the underlying portion? It's something you'd want in any employee, in any boss, actually in any situation whatsoever. Close to obedience, not quite. Integrity, right? When someone does something, even when no one else is looking, when they're doing the right thing, even when no one else is looking, even if they're not even going to get paid for it, integrity. And what goes, I think this fits not only this section on slaves and masters, but I think also with the parent-child relationship and the husband-wife relationship. What is seen speaks louder than what is said. What is seen speaks louder than what is said, and here's what I mean by that. You can say something, but if your actions follow it through, it's a lot louder. So a parent could say, I don't provoke my children to anger, but if you watch them, you're like, well, those were good words, but it doesn't match. You could have a slave saying, yeah, I obey my master like I would Jesus, but then you see how much they're stealing or taking away or how much they're trying to get away with while they're on the clock. Your actions speak louder. Honestly, and that's integrity. That's something we'd want not only in like a particular work environment or your school environment, that's any environment. The fact when people see you, it's like, well, why do you do that? I'm serving like I'd be serving Jesus. just what I do, because it's who I am. What is seen speaks louder than what is said. Going back to our slave here. Serve wholeheartedly as if you were serving the Lord. So it's kind of repeating what came before. Not people. Because you know that the Lord will reward each one for whatever good they do, whether they are slave or free. Now, notice it says will reward for whatever good they do. The reason why I'm able to say that is because this is not dependent on the identity. The identity is already in place. So think of that triangle. The Father is already given identity, whether master or slave. You are already a child of God. What you do should express this. This would be rewarded. This does not get you into heaven. This is extra. So as you grow in expressing your identity and living that out in what you do, there's probably going to be blessing that comes along with it. And it very well might not be monetarily. You might stay out of trouble. That's a blessing. When someone tries to ridicule you and be like, no, they're the one that embezzled the money. They're the one that cheated. Other people, because of what they've seen more than what they've heard about you, they're like, no, it couldn't be that person. It's the benefit of integrity. So that's some of the blessing that comes. Like, serve like you're serving the Lord, not people. He'll look out for you. That doesn't mean that everything's going to go perfect. It doesn't mean that you'll never get fired or that you won't ever fail. But it does mean it's like, if you're following this way, this is the way God set it up. Now, what about the masters? Masters. Now, the same thing with masters. Again, keep in mind that context. So when you see masters, and we're not talking about slaves, I do not want you to think plantation owner. That's a really poor association. Don't do that. Masters, it's someone who is in charge of other people. And that doesn't mean that this is automatically like boss and employee either. So you can't quite go that far. These are people that are in charge and are supposed to care for those underneath them. Typically, slaves would live in the home of their master. So it means you had some property, you had some wealth, and you're able to take care of these people. So how do they talk about them? Nope, already went there. Go past it. Treat your slaves in the same way. In the same way as what? Well, verse 6. Slaves, obey as you'd obey Christ. Masters, treat your slaves the same way you would treat Christ. So what would you do if you had to care for Jesus? We'll stretch the analogy. What if Jesus was your employee? How would you treat him? Does that change the way you treat the people that you work with now? Here's the kicker to the master. Now, there's only one verse. There are several about to the slaves, but there's only one to the master. But this one verse has a lot of punch to it in this one word. Look at it. Don't threaten them, since you know that he who is both their master and yours is in heaven, and there's no favoritism with him. Now, initially you could hear that and be like, man, that's like some heavy law statement. No favoritism. Boom. Or you could recognize no favoritism means God doesn't play favorites because all are equally loved. The gospel is the leveler. It's the leveler. And so within this context of this growing family of disciples of Jesus that come from all these different backgrounds and all these different classes and places of status and position and influence, in this verse, Paul's basically saying you all are the same because you all have the same master. But you might have different places where God's put you. The gospel has a lot of leveling power, yet there's still structure that's in place that God uses for the benefit of all. So Paul is not saying, destroy all the structures, they shouldn't be put in place, everyone should be completely equal, every way whatsoever. That's not what he's saying. Because beforehand he's like, there is a husband and a wife. There is a parent and a child. There is a master and a slave. This is part of the Bible Project's poster for Ephesians. So it's on the left-hand side, if you remember the back of the handouts for Bible study. I love how it does this, especially the portion. So this is the whole part that we've been in for quite a while, from chapter 4 to upper left corner, 6 verse 9. We're the transition from old to new. So instead of lies, anger, theft, gossip, revenge, promiscuity, and drunkenness, we're classified and known and characterized by truth, peace, generosity, encouragement, forgiveness, self-control, God's Spirit. And the signs of God's Spirit, this is what we looked at Bible study on Sunday, is singing together, singing alone, being thankful, elevating others. The Bible uses the word submit. Well, when you bring yourself underneath someone else, you elevate them within the context of the family of God, not within the walls of a church. I don't mean that. In the context of seeing each other as brothers and sisters, slaves, serving as though serving Christ, masters, caring as though caring for Christ, you get this beautiful dynamic of the structure that God's put in place for the benefit of society and for the benefit of all people. So it's about the relationship of Jesus and the church. You have respect and love. When it says about a wife submitting, she's allowing responsibility for the husband to love. He's laying down his life for his wife. Children and parents, slaves and masters, it works both ways. It's mutually beneficial. If both sides pay attention to their own verses, this works really well, and it's beautiful. There's a book called Love and Respect by Dr. Eggerichs. I think I said his last name right. And he mentions the crazy cycle within a marriage. That a husband wants to be respected, a woman wants to be sacrificially loved. But if the woman isn't sacrificially loved, she really doesn't feel like respecting. And if the husband tells that he's not being respected, he really doesn't want to give any love. And if the woman isn't feeling any love, she's not going to give any respect. And if she's not giving any respect, he doesn't feel it, so he's not going to get any love. And it's this cycle that unwinds the marriage. But if the husband feels respected, he's more prone to actually give that sense of sacrificial love. And if the woman knows that she's sacrificially loved, she's more prone to give that expression of respect. And it tightens the knot. Instead of unwinding it, it actually winds it tighter. Because the two work together. Honestly, to sum up what Dr. Lessing said in Bible study about marriage, just pay attention to your own verse. Husbands, stay out of the wife verses. Women, stay out of the husband verses. You just make sure you pay attention to your own verse, and you won't ever have to worry about watching your back. Sage marriage advice. If you're looking out for each other, you'll never have to look out for your own back. Pay attention to your verse. God's given you plenty to do. And if you're following with the help of the Holy Spirit, it'll go a lot better than always being like, didn't get any respect today. Unconditional love? Don't think so. It's not going to go well. Same thing works in parenting. Right, confirmation students? What? You'll find out. Your mentors will help you with that one. All right, wrap up. So this word vocation. This word vocation means a Christian's earthly and spiritual work. It's that cosmic earthly thing. You are not just a body that has a soul, nor are you a soul that's in a body. You're both. That's how God made you. Dust of the ground, breath of God, together. When you die, you return to dust. Your soul rests with Jesus. When he comes back, they get put back together. You are both. We are both natural and supernatural, spiritual and earthly. And so our vocation is where these roles intersect, where our service and our life to Christ impacts the way we view one another. I thought I'd give you a quote to help with this one as we wrap up. It's an old quote. I kind of uses some heady language, so I'll kind of piece it together for you. This is by a guy named Wengren, who wrote on Martin Luther's understanding of vocation. Martin Luther really loved this point, and I think it kind of made a shift in the church at the time. So this is just one small section from his book. For him who heeds his vocation, so him who pays attention to it, sanctification, the process of being made holy, is hidden in offensively ordinary tasks, with the result that it is hardly noticed at all that he's a Christian. But faith looks on simple duties as tasks to which vocation summons the man. And by the Spirit, he becomes aware of all those, quote, poor, dull, and despised works are adorned with the favor of God, quote, as with costliest gold and precious stones. Those two quoted parts that are in italics are from Luther himself, and he's actually referring to rocking a baby's cradle and washing their diapers. So in the context of Luther, when he originally wrote those words, he's actually talking about taking care of an infant. And for those of you who have you received anything back from that infant? For all the sleepless nights, all the diaper changes? Probably not. But that act of caring for an infant is just as holy as a pastor preaching a sermon because it's your vocation. I love this phrase. Hidden in offensively ordinary tasks. If you're in confirmation or high school right now, listen to me. You taking out the trash or doing chores for your parents is the way in which God is shaping your character to look more like His. It might seem offensively ordinary, but trust me, it is. Parents, having to patiently listening to your teenager complain about how unfair life is, God's shaping your character. Husbands, loving your wives when it's the last thing you want to do because you don't have an ounce of energy left except to flop in front of a TV with a remote. Trust me, God's shaping you. Wives, when the last thing you want to do is to let your husband lead because he'll get lost again. God is shaping your character. I love that phrase. Sanctification is hidden in offensively ordinary tasks. I kid you not. You will probably be shaped more outside of these walls than in here because that's where the rubber meets the road. And that's a good thing. The reason why it's important for us to gather here is to encourage each other after life's beat us up. Just be like, I can't listen to him one more week. I can't do it. It's okay. You'll make it. Okay. Thank you, God. I needed your word. I needed your forgiveness. I needed the Lord's Supper. Okay, let's do this again. And you go back in the ring. And while you're in there, God is shaping your character by what might seem so ordinary, like taking out the trash. Now, to wrap this up, they're action figures. You are an action figure. Outside the life of God, you can do nothing but pose and look like you're something special. But with Him working on you and moving you, you do something special. Remember, we're called to be imitators? Real simple action figure. This one. Washing feet. Jesus not only said, I love you, He showed it, and then said, guess what? They'll know you by the way that you love each other too. What is seen is speak louder than what's said. That's why we get to imitate Jesus. That's what a vocation is. We all have this God-given role to play with life and others. So if you're a student, that's your God-given role. If you're on a team, your teammate, that's your God-given role. Husband, wife, that's your God-given role. Father, mother, that's your God-given role. Pastor, that's my God-given role. Brother, sister, friend, neighbor, boss, employee, wherever you find yourself, that is your God-given role for you to be the action figure of God's love to the world. Embrace it, even if it's offensively ordinary. You never know what it'll do. All right, that's a wrap. Have fun in your discussion groups. No charades this time. But if you want to play, you can. Completely up to you.